Hello explorers, thanks for joining us again and welcome back to another exciting and informative video on our YouTube channel. If you are joining us for the first time, we want to thank you for watching. In this episode, I will be able to look into the reason why the West should not lose the continent of Africa. I will be able to explore this from a strategic point of view and look at some geopolitical shift that has happened recently in the continent, and also close down this episode from a more strategic aspect and looking at the reason why Europe should have a concern with things happening in the continent. So without any much delay, let's just dive straight into it. Africa is the continent of the future, yet Europe and the United States are not paying enough attention to its 1.4 billion people. They are losing influence to China and Russia with regards to data. While China, Russia and even Turkey recognize Africa's importance, Europe and the United States have not made the continent a priority with regard to strategic move in different areas. If you consider this, African countries need understanding, equal treatment and respect, which they receive from their non-Western partners. Specifically, the West can help by giving easier access to the markets for African products. To encourage Western businesses to operate on the continent, their investment needs to be protected and legally binding. So to point out, protectionism, red tape and regulatory barriers are a big problem though, both in Africa and in the West. Africa is important to the West, but the African people should also be master of their own affairs. As Europeans and Americans tear down monuments and change the names of streets and institutions, they have any connections with colonialism. They perceived a patronizing attitude towards Africa that is doing much harm to the continent of Africa. In this episode, I will be able to analyze this from a more strategic point like I've pointed out, so I encourage you to watch this video to the end for better understanding. In looking at the continent of Africa, lately, Africa has had a procession of high-profile visitors. In July, so to point out, and August, French President Emmanuel Macron toured several nations, and did Russia Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov and the United States of America Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan preceded them late last year, so to point out, and again in February of this year, while British Prime Minister and Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister, so to point out, visited Rwanda in June for Commonwealth heads of government meetings. Probably due to the zero-COVID policy, no high-level Chinese leaders have visited Africa lately. Moving ahead, Africa is a remarkable diverse continent. North Africa is divided from the rest of the landmass by the vast Saharan desert. Northern Africa is a close neighbor of Europe, which lies on the other side of the Mediterranean Sea. Thousands of years of easy shipping on the Mediterranean have established a common cultural zone among Southern Europe, Northern Africa and Middle East. The emergence of Islam in the 7th century divided North Africa from Europe. In different aspects, Sub-Saharan Africa and Sahel zone were except for coastal outcomes and the Cape of Good Hope areas. Terra incognita to Europeans for a long time. Only after remedies against tropical disease and malaria become available did Europeans start to explore and then colonize Africa in the mid-19th century. But the legacy of colonialism has had its own impact. The colonization, widely accepted then in Europe and the United States, cannot only be reduced to the detrimental effects for exploitation and oppression. Much was accomplished in the education, infrastructure, healthcare in different areas. The population of the continent of Africa increased from an estimated 90 million in 1870 at the beginning of colonization to some over 230 million as of 1950. Decolonization started in the second half of the 1950s. By 2021, the population soared to about 1.4 billion people in the continent of Africa. Africa is a rich continent with a young population. Its arable land could, in theory, feed much larger numbers than today's population. Its wealth in natural resources such as in iron ore, cobalt, lithium, copper, uranium, manganese and many more minerals. Africa's strategic position in the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean means that the continent could play an important role in the future geopolitical development. There are 54 African countries represented in the United Nations, giving the continent an important position, some 30% in votes, but also the United Nations sub-organization to put the continent in different ways. Since decolonization, Europe and the United States have unfortunately not focused much on Africa. Beyond some business dealings and poor allocation of aid, the West has also absent from the continent. Fears of mass migration, however, has sparked Europe's recent interest. If you are new to this channel, we will encourage you to subscribe and share our videos with your different network. There is a big concern with regards to how Western country promotes the value of paternalistic way in regards to the African perspective. Meanwhile, China and Russia increased their influence in Africa. Beijing exercised it by mainly developing infrastructure, helping it to secure access to raw materials and agricultural products, and in turn strategic influence. Moscow is strongly in military development and security. Turkey has understood the importance of the continent very well. It is active in infrastructure and businesses, but also in the defense area with naval bases in Sudan, Red Sea. Turkish Airlines is among the largest in the continent of Africa, serving more than 50 destinations in the African continent. China and Russia and Turkey limit themselves to working with existing structures. They do not criticize the country or governance political system, cultural habits and traditions, be it gender issues, birth control or equality. The West, however, promotes values in a paternalistic way. This is not the way appreciated in the continent. Although economic aid is welcome, such paternalism is seen as a new form of colonialism from different areas. In considering the movement with regards to Lavrov visit in Ethiopia, Egypt, Uganda, and the Congo-Brazzaville, this was a demonstration that Russia has the foreign policy power to challenge the West on this continent. In the vote with regards to the United Nations General Assembly condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine, 17 African countries abstained. Russia focused on equal partnership and tangible projects paid off in different ways. In regards to this visit, President Erdoğan visited Angola, Nigeria, Togo, Senegal, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Guinea-Bissau. Turkish businesses is driving humanitarian help in forthcoming, such as in Somalia, and infrastructural projects such as the railway from landlocked Ethiopia to the port of Djibouti area underway. Ankara treats the African nations as true partners worthy of respect in different ways. The Chinese presence is now the strongest foreign one. The country's policy is to further increase its influence without openly criticizing the host countries. Mr. Blinken's trip might have lacked pragmatism. He visited South Africa, Rwanda, and Democratic Republic of the Congo. The main purpose was to encourage African nations to join the containment and sanctions policy towards Russia. He did not have an easy ride, so to point out. It was even made difficult because the United States Congress is advancing legislations called the Counterfeiting Malign Russian Activities in African Act. South African Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor criticized the act as penalizing Africa's countries, called it offensive in different ways. With looking at this, Secretary Blinken stressed that Washington will not dictate which choice Africans should make, and neither should anyone else. The United States of America will launch a Global Fragile Act of $200 million which year to the next 10 years. This program will make decade-long investment in promoting more peaceful, more inclusive, more resilient societies in places where conditions are ripe for conflict. The United States' commitment is no more match to that of investment made by China. Mr. Pandor described partners in Europe as elsewhere for their patronizing and bullying attitude. The elsewhere might even have a diplomatic way to include the United States of America, Europe, and also global countries coming to do business or perceiving Africa in different ways. A similar impression could prevail in Rwanda. Rwanda has no natural resources beside agriculture. President Paul Kagame has led a successful transformation of the country. However, instead of focusing on mutually beneficial interests, Mr. Blinken criticized alleged Rwandan support for the M23 militias in eastern Congo. There is no reason for the United States Secretary of State to be meddling into the issues, especially as the M23 might also have legitimate reasons to defend minorities in that part of the continent. President Macron's visit to Cameroon, Benin, Guinea-Bissau, with the intention to reboost France's post-colonial relationship with the continent of Africa. Although the policy of the trip is not to touch issues of governance, the French leader claimed that he would address such issues in conversation. Mr. Macron can be presumptuous in his attitude, for instance in promoting birth control. This is a touchy subject because children in Africa provide social security for people in their old age in different areas. The main issue for France, however, is to stem the rising influence of Russian military in some African countries. In Mali, French peacekeeping troops are now replaced by Russian security forces, and mercenaries operate in Libya, Sudan, Central African Republic, Mozambique, Madagascar. Paris also feels threatened by Turkey in other ways. The impact of President Macron's mission remains doubtful. France has taken some huge initiative in transforming different areas with regards to relationship in the continent. From my analysis, it is perceived that Europe and the West should not lose the continent of Africa. Africa has become a huge playground recently. There are lots of activities happening in the continent, and for those countries that are not paying attention, Africa may be shifting to other regions and doing business with regards to China, Russia, and also Turkey at the moment. Hopefully, we've informed you with regards to the reason why the West should not lose the continent of Africa, as Africa is a strategic continent. With regards to its presence in the United Nations, it has some huge impacts, not just because of natural resources, but Africa should be perceived in like partnership, not just as a recipient of aid or someone that is expecting support from the West. We want to thank you for watching The Explorer. If you are new to this channel, we encourage you to subscribe and share our videos with your different network. We encourage you to check some of our informative videos on this YouTube channel. We are looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.